Well, there aren't many moves that I think really have the capacity to shock at the trade deadline or at the roster deadline, at any deadline. There are very few that really catch you off guard, but I think we got one today, at least catching us off guard in terms of where the player has been and what his arc has been over the last few weeks. And of course, I'm talking about Tim Patrick here on Orange and Blue Today on a Monday, August 26th. And there it is. The Broncos are saying goodbye to the one and only Tim Patrick. Of course, the Broncos let him go. They may be trading him. They may be releasing him. Depends what happens in the next 24 hours. But notifying him today that after the last 7 seasons, Tim Patrick is no longer in his plans. Andrew Mason here, Cecil Lammey on assignment. So you'll hear from him again on Wednesday. So it's just me solo here on a big day, and a day that, interestingly enough, I think I could have seen coming a month ago, but I didn't see coming a week ago. And what I mean by that is we talked about Tim Patrick's form during OTAs and minicamp leading into training camp, and how when he was out there on the field during off-season work, it looked like there was a hitch as he moved in a straight line and got upfield. That's okay. He never had great straight line speed. Looked like that there was a hitch in his gallop, but that hitch seemed to go away over training camp. And the other thing that we saw was, even though his straight line speed may not have been what it once was, his cutting ability clearly was what it once was. And he was able to run routes with precision and get open consistently. And to that end, the Broncos kept him out there with the first team throughout training camp. Perennial first teamer, saw it every day. Saw him getting timing with Bo Nix as well. And for this offense that's going to be rhythm and timing based, Tim Patrick seemed to be somebody who had plenty of attributes and plenty of reasons to be around. So anyway, that's where it starts. The big news there as the Broncos start this off. Already getting some comments in. Kale Blaster saying, dude made $31 million over 2 years not playing. Denver was more than fair to him. Best of luck, Timmy. Yeah, Denver was fair to him. And you know what? Denver was fair to him when they gave him a restructured contract for this year as well, because the Broncos could have just cut him back in March, would have had minimal disruption to the salary cap. That contract that he signed in November of 2021, back when George Payton gave out the midseason deals to Tim Patrick and Courtland Sutton. Effectively, Courtland Sutton it was a 4-year contract, but effectively a 3-year deal. Tim Patrick, a 3-year contract, effectively a 2-year deal. So it was one of those things where, he made a lot of money for being injured the last couple of years. But I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, it's a bad break. He worked his tail off to get back. He talked earlier in training camp about some of the mental hurdles that he had to overcome, understandably so. In particular, when I asked him about whether he was able to do mental reps over the course of the 2023 season, he said, man, I wasn't in the mind frame for that. And it's understandable. You lose one season injury, it's bad enough. You lose 2 straight seasons to injuries, it takes you another level entirely. Now he's not going to be a Bronco. They're going to try to trade him. I don't know that they're going to find much of a market. And certainly if you do find a partner for Tim Patrick who just wants to go ahead and get him without playing the game of seeing if you can negotiate him in after the Broncos release him, I don't think you're talking about much here. I'd be shocked if the Broncos get anything more than a 7th round pick. It could be one of the George Payton specials where they get a 6th round pick and they give up a 7th round pick in Tim Patrick, where you walk away with the same number of picks as you did when you walked into the exchange. So man, this is it's a move that, again, if they made this a month ago based on the data that we had coming out of OTAs and into training camp, I think we would have seen coming. But he looked good out there, consistently making plays. and in particular look to have very good timing with Bo Nix. I think more than once I refer to Tim Patrick as a Bo Nix security blanket. And I do question whether moving on from Tim Patrick is the best thing for Bo Nix, because you're losing that. Not that Courtland Sutton isn't reliable, but he's a different type of receiver. Tim Patrick, a successful season for him, if he had been in this Broncos offense, was probably something along the lines of 70 catches, 650 yards. In other words, not even averaging 10 yards a reception. But a lot of those 7, 8, 9-yard plays, keeping you on schedule, being that reliable element on the slant routes. Now we'll probably see some of that go to Josh Reynolds. We've seen him work on the outside as well, but they may move him around a little bit. And the thing with Josh Reynolds is the first thing that comes to mind is the high drop rate, and not just talking about the drops in the NFC Championship game, which were a huge part of the reason why he sat on the market for 2 weeks before the Broncos picked him up. Historically has a drop rate that is higher than average. And we've already seen one play in the preseason where he had the ball go between the wickets, basically, on that pass down the right side from Bo Nix back there in the Indianapolis game. Aaron says it's wild considering that he seemed to be Bo Nix's main target in that second game. Yeah, that's the thing. They had chemistry. This is why I don't think any of us looking at this team closely over the last few weeks really thought that they would actually move on from Tim Patrick. I'll actually give credit to Jake Shapiro of denversports.com, who I think half jokingly, half seriously, as we sat down for our weekly meeting, said, oh, they're going to cut Tim Patrick. I don't know if he was being serious about that, but turned out to be spot on. I'm like, no. Nate Albert, you can replace Tim A. The wide receiver room is loaded. You can replace him long term. I think in the short term, you're taking a hit. Again, Josh Reynolds, you're still concerned about the drop rate after you've seen some drops from him in practice. You saw in the preseason game the ball go between the wickets. So I don't think it's a one-for-one replacement in terms of reliability if you basically give what Tim Patrick had to Josh Reynolds. We've talked at length about Marvin Mims Jr. I know Cecil addressed this yesterday when he was doing the post-game show. Marvin Mims Jr.'s had a frustrating camp, and he is not the same type of pass catcher that Tim Patrick is. You may give him some more reps, and hopefully he can develop some more branches on the route tree, but right now, still more of a deep threat there. Troy Franklin coming on, I don't think he's there yet, although the last couple of weeks have shown some palpable progress. What this also brings you to is there now room for somebody to sneak in? I still think Lil Jordan Humphrey is going to be exposed to not the waiver wire, because he'd be released. He's a vested veteran, but I still think the Broncos may end up playing the practice squad elevation game with Lil Jordan Humphrey, who effectively is a special teamer who provides wide receiver depth. So that's something I think you have to bear in mind as well, that someone like Lil Jordan Humphrey, he could be like wide receiver 7 on the practice squad. You give him 3 elevations early in the season, and then you activate him mostly for special teams. Brandon Johnson. Now, this is where I think it might get interesting, because we didn't see Brandon Johnson until the second half yesterday in the preseason finale. And if you looked at kind of where he stood, it would be hard to envision him being on the 53, even though he's been a productive depth piece for the Broncos over the last couple of years. Now you take Tim Patrick out. Who's taking those reps? I don't think it's Troy Franklin just yet. It could be Lil Jordan Humphrey coming from the practice squad elevation ranks. It could be someone else. Here's another question. This comes in from Trey. Is there just too many similar styles of play in the wide receiver room? Yeah, you could say that there is some redundancy of skills with Patrick, Sutton, and Reynolds. They're very similar types of receivers. Differences, yes, they're not exactly the same, but you would categorize them as big, long receivers that don't have the most speed, but use other things to get open, and also can make catches in traffic because of their frame. So that you have to bear in mind as well. Lurker Troy says, get rid of anyone over 26 years old. Okay, then Devon Vele is not making the team. And I think Devon Vele is going to be on the team, and that may be another move that you're talking about here in this equation. Now you can go Reynolds, Sutton, Mims, Vele, Franklin, and then are you talking about a Brandon Johnson? Or are you talking about even low Jordan Humphrey on the 53? But yeah, you get rid of anyone over 26 years old. You're saying goodbye to a rookie, a holy diver. If Tyler Beatty and Tim Patrick end up on the Chiefs, that would be horrible. These things happen. The Broncos trying to trade Tim Patrick first, and I think their first option would be not to trade him to Kansas City. William says Vele will be that guy now. Vele can be that guy. The question is he ready to be that guy now? And that's where I would say not yet. Even before the injury that he had cost him some playing time, some playing and practice time. He had become he'd had a few days that were not as consistent as the ones he had early in camp leading up to that spectacular one-handed catch that he had. That was basically the catch of training camp. Devon Vele, I think, can get there. I don't know that he's ready to be that right now. Could he be that the back half of the season? Yes. And this is another thing that may come into play here in a decision like this, is projecting, okay, if you gave Devon Vele more work, where is he on the back half of the season compared to where Tim Patrick would be? You're making a future play here when you go with Tim Patrick now on the roster and Devon Vele potentially on the 53. Orange and Blue Today, of course. Andrew Mason here, Cecil Lammey on assignment. And let's actually take a look at the moves that were made today. Start, of course, with the guys that are trade bait. And the guys that are trade bait are, of course, Tim Patrick and Samaje Perine. They won't be back. Those players have been notified. They will not be with the Denver Broncos. Patrick, a surprise. Samaje Perine, not a surprise at all, based on how he'd been used and just the way everything was trending with him. The fact that he didn't play on Sunday, and now we can say the same for Tim Patrick, but when we did not see Samaje Perine play on Sunday, it was pretty clear this was like in baseball when you trade somebody or you're about to trade somebody at the deadline in late July. You got a picture. You're about to make a deal. You don't want to mess up that deal. So you're going to skip his turn in the rotation and let him make his first start with his next team. So that was not a surprise at all. Broncos at running back look poised to go with Javonte Williams, Khalil McLaughlin, and Audric Estime. Here are all the moves from today as I get the graphic right here real quick. Waived safety Omar Brown, cornerback Art Green, cornerback Caleb Hayes, guard Oliver Jervis, inside linebacker Alec Mock. Not a surprise really on any of those. Trenton Gill to be waived, could be traded. I don't know if there's going to be much of a market. Not a surprise that they went with Riley Dixon over Trenton Gill, given Dixon's consistency. In any given day, Trenton Gill would have the best single punt, but he'd also have the worst couple of punts there. Released defensive lineman Angelo Blackson, wide receiver Philip Dorsett, inside linebacker Andre Smith Jr. Blackson, an interesting move. If you watch the show that I had on Saturday, I actually had Angelo Blackson on my 53, and he'd had a really good camp. Now you start looking at the defensive line. If you go with 6, this now gives you room to have 2 of these 3 on the roster. Jordan Jackson, Eni Awazurike, Matt Henningsen. Henningsen's the type of player that might be hard to slip through to the practice squad. He is a third-year veteran, thus not yet vested, subject to the waiver claim process. And basically every team somewhere in their depth likes to have a guy like Matt Henningsen who can play all 3 spots, be a plugger, can also be on field goal rush, and very intelligent, helps everyone else in the room. So there's intangibles that add to his value there. Jordan Jackson, of course, had the tremendous game on Sunday, but he's had a tremendous camp to this point. And Wazarike hasn't yet flashed. He still clearly does not look to be in football shape just yet after missing last year because of the NFL suspension for gambling. But the Broncos may not want to take a risk. Now that they've released Angelo Blackson, it's possible you may be looking at a scenario where Wazarike sticks. Keep your eye on that as you get into tomorrow. Just take a look at the other cuts there. Alec Mock, I could maybe on the practice squad, but you got some competition there. Philip Dorsett, wouldn't be surprised if he ends up back on the practice squad, just to have another veteran in that room. And then, Omar Brown kind of got outplayed at safety by some other guys. I know the Broncos were high on him, maybe on the practice squad, but maybe not. Andre Smith Jr., I expected a little more out of him when the Broncos signed him back in June. So he never really gained traction. Frankly, you saw other guys, an inside linebacker, like, for example, Lavelle Bailey, outplaying him. Into the comments section here. I know we got some good ones, good ones coming in. Daniel Sepp says, making room for Dondrea Tillman. Well, that would be at edge. So that would, if you kept him on the edge, that means you're going with at least 5 there. Are you sacrificing from inside linebacker? Are you sacrificing from the defensive line? If you went heavy at edge, lighter on the defensive line, then you might only have room for one of Henningsen, Jackson, and Wazarike. Let's see here. Alex Smith, what happens when tiny little Jaleel won't be able to run up the middle? You know what? He can run up the middle. And the Broncos have been using him up the middle in practice. He's added some weight. He's a little bit stouter, but he's lost none of the speed, none of the explosiveness. I think you're going to see the Broncos willing to send him up the middle, willing to have him take on blockers in pass protection occasionally. So respectfully, Alex Smith, I don't really agree with your captain. Alex Smith also said not happy about P. Ryan move either. Look, that's been coming for weeks. And the moment that Jaleel McLaughlin started taking Samaje P. Ryan's reps as you went into 2-minute, as you went into third downs, the die was cast. Once the Broncos realized they could trust Samaje P. or they could trust Jaleel McLaughlin with the Samaje P. Ryan role, there was no place for Samaje P. Ryan on the 53 at this point. So I think there's a decent chance they'll get something for him. There's already indications some teams are on the market. I know we got one comment pointing out Dallas may have some interest. So I actually think it's more likely that Samaje P. Ryan brings back something in trade value than Tim Patrick. So that's just my take. Mass Collector says, Patrick gave Vele his number when he got drafted, same college. Yep, number 81. And in fact, sometimes when you do watch Devon Vele make plays 81, you're like, is that Tim Patrick? And you wonder if on some subconscious level that factored into the decision-making as well. Orange and Blue Today, Andrew Mason here, Cecil Lammey on assignment. Run it back with an interesting comment here. This is Sean Payton saying he's taking the training wheels off. Fact is, Tim Patrick has 2 major injuries, and our wide receiver room has a lot of younger players with much higher potential. I wouldn't say higher potential. I'd say someone like Devon Vele has the potential to be as good as Tim Patrick. The thing is, are you sacrificing potentially in the short term? Yet, you can make the argument here that if you've got Troy Franklin or Devon Vele getting the reps in week 1 that Tim Patrick would have gotten, it's a worse offense. It's a worse collection of receivers at that moment. The question is, where is it 2 months from now? Because, we're sitting here talking about Tim Patrick being cut, and a month ago, if it had happened, I think it wouldn't have been a surprise based on what we saw in OTAs. Now, but as they say in draft day, we live in a different world now than we did X amount of days ago, 30 days ago, 60 days ago. I think in draft day at one point, we live in a different world now than we did 2 minutes ago. So we will live in a different world in early November than we do right now. In that different world, if Troy Franklin and Devon Vele have gotten some quality reps under them, are they as effective as Tim Patrick was? That is the question. Devon Vele, Marcus Colston 2.0. You know what? Wouldn't surprise me. Certainly, like he's made some plays. He's shown some spark. The only thing on Devon Vele is 27. 27 years old. This is somebody who the ramp long term isn't very long. That 30th birthday is going to come quicker than you think. So, this Brandon Johnson probably be more productive than Mims. Sad to say. Depends how you use him. Marvin Mims Jr. still brings something you need in this offense. That's a vertical threat. So, Wolfgang Paco says, please add Stiddy to that list. I think you're referring, of course, to the cut list, and we'll just refresh that real quick here. You know what? I was going to lead this show. All right. I was going to lead this show originally with Jarrett Stidham and the comments about Bo Nix winning the number one job, because they've obviously gone viral in the last 22 hours or so. And I think there needs to be some grace. In fact, the slide that I was going to have at the top of the show was going to be about giving Jarrett Stidham grace. So let's first of all, we're going to play the comment here from Jarrett Stidham when he was asked about his reaction when he heard that Bo Nix had beaten him out for the starting job.
I mean, first of all, obviously I was very disappointed. I know I'm a starting quarterback in this league. I have zero doubts about that. And, it just didn't shake out my way. But I know what kind of player I am, kind of person I am. And like I said earlier, I'll be ready to go if I need to be. And, like I said, I have no doubts that I'm a starting caliber quarterback in this league.
Okay. So, he's talking about himself. I would say this, and I know, yes, these football players, they live lives of privilege, making millions of dollars. They can have financial security as long as they don't, blow their largesse. And even if you're not making, even if you're not making Quinn Miner's money, you're doing pretty well, much better than almost anybody who's straight out of college. But if you're Jarrett Stidham, think about this for a moment. Your lifelong dream is to be a starting quarterback in the National Football League. And you've seen your best chance at achieving that dream slip away. The odds are he's never going to have a chance as good as this one. And even though all roads lead to Bo Nix eventually, just being the starter for half a season and putting good film out there could have gotten him a gig starting next year somewhere. Ask Teddy Bridgewater about 6 starts for Sean Payton, 1 in 2018, 5 in 2019. And in those 5, the Saints went 5-0 for Teddy Bridgewater as a starting quarterback. Ask what it did for him. He turned around. He signed a starting quarterback contract with the Carolina Panthers. And then, of course, he was traded to Denver, went on to Miami. Effectively, based on what he made off of that contract alone, those starts for Sean Payton were worth $33 million to Teddy Bridgewater. That's for example, that's a new field at the high school stadium where Teddy Bridgewater now coaches, which is called Teddy Bridgewater Field, because he took some of that money and gave it back to his alma mater to take care of them. Point being, Stidham looked at this and saw all this. This is the potential to actually get something I've always dreamed of having, and even get a little more financial security for the long term for his family. That's gone now. Now Jarrett Stidham probably at best is a career backup. He has to mourn that. He has to grieve that. He has to get over it. Yes, and you do grieve the loss of dreams, lifelong dreams, like being a full-time starting quarterback and not just a fill-in. But Jarrett Stidham's not going to be a problem in the locker room. I mean, he was one of the best locker room guys last year, and gives this answer when he's asked about helping out Bo Nix.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm going to do whatever I can to help Bo get prepared. Obviously, he's never had a real season like this in the NFL, so I'm going to help him in whatever way I can, and then also be ready to go if I need to be. So just ready for the season to get here and get started. Yeah,
he's going to be ready to go if he needs to be, but he's also going to support Bo Nix. And That, I think, is the bottom line on this, and why I think you'll see Jarrett Stidham still on this team when Tuesday comes around, unless the Broncos get an offer that knocks their socks off. And I don't think they will. I think they want to ride with three quarterbacks. I think they like the stability of Jarrett Stidham immediately behind Bo Nix, and they also like the potential of Zach Wilson. Of course, for framing this, one of the reasons why Jarrett Stidham has taken so much criticism on social media is because of what Zach Wilson said, and here's response. Here's what he had to say last night.
Yeah, I was excited for him. I mean, I don't think it was a surprise too much, obviously, right? I think he's had a great camp. I told him I'm excited for him for this opportunity. I really believe that they're putting him in a good situation. I think Sean has done a phenomenal job, and then the guys that we get to hang out with, starting with Davis and then Joe and Pete and then Johnny Moe, we have a great offensive staff. I think they do a great job. And then Bo has just continued to keep getting better, so I'm excited to see what he can do, and I think he's ready for it.
I'll say this, the line Bo has just continued to keep getting better. That's sort of a acknowledgement of what he knows, and even what Jarrett Stidham knows. Joe Brewer saying Stidham's had 3 teams tell him he's not starter level. Yeah. So there's the thing. I mean, I know there's some might say, oh, there's a little bit of delusion there. He sees himself as a starter, but he's now been told no by the Broncos, the Raiders, and the Patriots. But you have to have that confidence, right? You don't get to the NFL without having extreme confidence in yourself and your abilities. If you don't have that, you're going to be absolutely fried. You're going to have no chance whatsoever. So I'm going to give him a pass. I'm going to give him a pass on this. William, I'm fine with either being the backup. I'm fine with them keeping all 3. Yeah, that's fair. I think you feel better about all 3 now. What's interesting, the NFLPA denied the rule change that had been proposed, which would have allowed teams an unlimited number of practice squad elevations for a third quarterback. So effectively last year, if they'd had that rule potentially in place, the Broncos could elevate Ben DiNucci every week off the practice squad as a third quarterback. Now you can't do that. And of course, the third quarterback doesn't have to count against the overall active list on game day, which now, again, it behooves you to have a third quarterback on your 53, but you don't have the option of having a practice squad quarterback and saying, we'll elevate you. I know we talked a little bit about that with Jarrett Stidham, like, just put him on the practice squad and, give him a huge amount of money, honor his contract, and then keep elevating him. According to the NFLPA now, based on what they said today, you can't do that here. A couple more comments. This one from the Blind Swordsman. I hear that, Mace. However, I feel like Bo gives you the best chance to win. Well, Bo definitely gives them the best chance to win, not only among the quarterbacks. The question is, in terms of the move you made with Tim Patrick, does that hurt Bo Nix's chances of leading you to a win when you've taken away somebody who had very quickly developed into a security blanket? David Boweray, how is Lil Jordan Humphrey a better option than Tim Patrick? I think objectively he's not. But Lil Jordan Humphrey plays special teams. Backup receivers have to play special teams or they're not going to get a jersey. Tim Patrick, that's not where he is at this point in his football life. Certainly not only because he's been a starter the last few years, but also where he stands in terms of his health. So, man, appreciate all the comments from you guys. They're coming in fast and furious. How is Josh Reynolds better than Tim Patrick? Little more vertical speed at this point. Like I said, based on what I saw in OTAs and minicamp, it looked like TP had lost a step in his vertical speed, but hadn't lost his quickness, hadn't lost his cutting ability, and that's why you saw him getting open. And it was really cool to see him do that over the course of training camp, even though, this guy's not going to be able to stretch a 10-yard play into a 40-yarder like he used to, but he could still do a lot of good things as well. Jeremy Bales says, are they going to try to get Timmy P back to the practice squad? The first thing is trying to trade him. After that, I don't know. Like, that's one. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know the answer to that. That would be a humbling experience for Tim Patrick. I'm not sure it's something he wants to go through. I think he may want to see what else is out there. Look, the Broncos, this is a team where he's been a leader. I mean, a week ago we were talking about the notion of him being a team captain this year, legitimately. And I think he would have earned it. Going from that to being one of the unquestioned locker room leaders to being a guy on the practice squad, I can't see it. John says, low line help, please. And I do wonder if that's a position where the Broncos look on the waiver wire after tomorrow and see what is there depth-wise. Spirit of Detroit podcast. Josh ain't the guy. Trust me, he's a solid too, but if you're banking on 1,000 yards, aim for 600, 800. I don't think you'll see much value there. I don't think anybody is reasonably expecting 1,000 yards from Tim Patrick this year. Or Josh Reynolds, pardon me. I'm sorry. I don't think that's something that you're expecting. I look at Josh Reynolds, the type of season, and I know I gave some numbers on Tim Patrick, like 70 catches, 650 yards. I think with Josh Reynolds, if he catches 60 passes for 700 yards, that's what you're looking for. And the funny thing is, like, that's kind of what you're paying for in terms of what his contract is. Mike Naylor checking in. Sad about TP. Who takes that spot? I'm late. Well, I think you'll see Josh Reynolds and Courtland Sutton, and then beyond that, maybe you work Marvin Mims Jr. in more. Maybe he's kind of more your true slot guy, and you've got Reynolds and Sutton on the outside. Again, Mims has got to show more than he showed during training camp. Not a good training camp for him. I think you also maybe see Devon Vele eased into some work as well, especially now that he's coming back from his injury. John Gervasio, none of this matters. We get beat in the trenches. How do we look there? Starting offensive line looks pretty good. Didn't like the penalties that they had against the Colts there with a false start by McGlinchey, hold by Garrett Bolles, but I like what we've seen up front. I'm a little concerned about the depth. I think the Broncos are concerned about the depth on the offensive line too. Andy Strant, is Justin Sternad at linebacker the real deal now? I think maybe he's a better depth piece than he has been. You recall that when they tried him out at linebacker, putting him in there during the 2021 season, he struggled mightily. I can't forget that the Ernest Johnson game in Cleveland, and it was one of the reasons why the Broncos made a trade and then brought Baron Browning up and moved him to inside linebacker because they didn't have something sustainable and functional at inside linebacker. But he's grown. Players do grow over time. I think Sternad's a nice depth piece, no doubt. But make no mistake, if he's on the 53, as I expect he will be, he's there. He's there for special teams. That's always the thing. And finally, Mass Collector. I think Vele will end up being better than Reynolds anyway. You know what? I could see by next year Devon Vele being better than Josh Reynolds. And that sort of brings a wrap to this whole discussion of Tim Patrick and the Broncos making the move today. They're not a better team with a better receiver core in week 1 with Tim Patrick not out there on the field. But looking over the horizon, if you're getting Devon Vele more reps, if he becomes a beneficiary of this in terms of playing time, is their wide receiver core better with him blossoming and growing into the next Tim Patrick, or maybe even something more, than if you've ridden out Tim Patrick and gotten as much out of him the rest of the way as you could? I think it's fair to say, yeah, that they may well be better. Mims might have a huge season. Hopefully, I want to see more effort from Sutton in the red zone. I think, yep, everyone does. And finally, Ken saying Vele is next Puka Nacua. That's a heck of a comparison. I'm not going to go there. I just want to see Devon Vele deliver some good work and keep getting better. Keep improving. The progress has been there. And now potentially an awful lot has landed on him. But I look forward to it. I look forward to seeing how he grows. I don't think he's ready to be a wide receiver in the starting 3 just yet. But I think now the ramp to that got really short today with the decision to move on from Tim Patrick, either by trade or by release. Well, fun show. I mean, fun show, fun talking to you. Not fun talking about the Broncos letting go of somebody like Tim Patrick. These are the two hardest days on the football calendar. They're my least favorite. They involve goodbyes. Nobody likes that. But most poignantly, they involve dreams dying, and some of those dreams never being resuscitated. So all the best to Tim Patrick. It's been, it was a privilege covering him. Intelligent, great to watch, great to see him grow from a practice squad guy into what he became. And you can't help but wonder how things would have turned out if he had not torn his ACL on that camp day 2 years ago, which really started a very sad 2 years for Tim Patrick. And now, after a sign that he might be a big part of this offense, Tim Patrick, as of tomorrow, will no longer be a Denver Bronco. Cecil will be back on Wednesday. I'll be riding with you on Cut Day Tuesday. We're hoping to hear from George Payton tomorrow. Depending on what time that is, we'll be able to talk about what George has to say about the roster deadline and the moves coming in. There's plenty of moves to go, but there's already plenty to talk about as we break it down on this last week of the preseason / off season. A week from now, we'll be in regular season mode. So for everyone at denversports.com, Andrew Mason here saying take care. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.